You guys remember when Nintendo used to make things that didn't break? Their hardware lasts significantly longer than you'd expect. There's that famous Game Boy that survived a bombing. I remember there were pretty good durability videos on tests done on the GameCube versus the Xbox versus the PlayStation 2 to see which one can survive the highest fall or the strongest impact. And the little purple lunchbox would always come out on top. Our basement flooded back when I was in high school, and we ended up having to throw out our Xbox 360. But you know what survived? The Wii remote that is right next to me on this desk. But outside of that, there was always little minor issues that these consoles would have, and they were usually related to a loose part that never would have gotten any damage to it if it wasn't controlled by children. So like the cover for an expansion pack on your Nintendo 64 would likely end up getting either lost or cracked because the kids play with it too much. Same with the battery cover on my Game Boy Advance. Or the flap that would cover the GameCube controller ports on the Nintendo Wii. Or the hinge on the original Fat DS. That one is not because of kids, I think that one was actually a defect. For the most part though, this was minor stuff. I think my original 3DS ended up getting an issue when I started playing Smash Brothers on it. The cover on the circle pad ended up sliding off, so I actually had to crazy glue it back on, and that worked out fine. The point is, I'd say for the most part, the consoles I've had have all held up. Yeah, they might have faced a few hiccups here and there, more so when I was younger than when I got older. But I don't recall facing many issues that were game-breaking, or console-breaking. Especially the controllers. Outside of the Nintendo 64 joystick, we've been pretty good. The only issue that I had personally faced with the Nintendo Switch when I purchased it, initially, was the kickstand. When I saw that the kickstand wasn't good, I was like, yeah, this is a pretty typical Nintendo problem. Something loose and flimsy, and it will probably just end up falling off and not being usable anymore. It was hardly usable when it was working fine. Shortly after the Switch's launch, throughout the online forums, you'd notice more and more people complaining about the Joy-Con drift. If you jump on Google right now, search the phrase Joy-Con drift, set a custom range so that it only shows everything leading up to the end of 2017, you will see tons of posts and articles about it. This was a defect from launch. A defect that Nintendo denied for a very long time. At first, it was all about the warranty. If you could get back to them before the warranty expired, you might have gotten it fixed. After that, depending on the region you were in, it might have been anywhere between 2019 and 2023 in some places in Europe, where Nintendo was finally willing to fix these Joy-Cons because they were required to by law. Let's make no mistake here. The only reason Nintendo would fix Joy-Con drifts is because they were required to. I want that to be very clear because I think some people forget that. They're happy that Nintendo is fixing their Joy-Cons. They're fixing a problem that they created, they blame the consumer for it, and they tried their damnedest to deny that there was any issue on their end. But even until now, I hear of people that have bought the Joy-Con within the past year complaining about Joy-Con drift. So it's not like at some point they were on version 5 or whatever and there was no issues anymore. They figured they'd just ride it out. If somebody was to complain and send in their Joy-Cons, they'll fix it. But they know most people don't have the time for it. They might not have the patience for it. A lot of people will just go out of their way to buy another set of Joy-Cons and use those in the meantime while they send the old ones in. In 2020, after a class action lawsuit, the Nintendo president actually apologized for the Joy-Con drift. This is before the lawsuit had come to a close, by the way. The president promised improvements on the Joy-Cons. In May of 2023, Tears of the Kingdom was launched. By that time, Nintendo had won the class action lawsuits that were against them for the Joy-Cons. And I don't know if you remember, but there was a mass defect issue with Tears of the Kingdom Switch Pro controllers that were suffering from a defect similar to the Joy-Con drift. The EULA stated that as a customer, you were not allowed to sue them if you agreed to use their product. That's why Nintendo was able to be so stingy and hold out for as long as they did in Europe. Now, in May of 2023, after Zelda launched and people were complaining about the Pro Controller issues, you could actually find a surge of articles online downplaying the issue with the Pro Controllers. There's an actual Nintendo Life article titled PSA, Zelda Tears of the Kingdom Pro Controller Drifting After a Few Hours? It might just need recalibrating. And then they humorously included a subtitle that says, put the soldering iron away for now. But they were not the only outlet that was sharing this information, and they all came at the same time. So yeah, do with that information what you will. Now, the best part is when people started trying to recalibrate it using the software that was built into the Switch, they kept hitting a bug. Many people feared the Pro Controller would face similar issues that the Joy-Cons did. But I don't know if it's because fewer people bought a Pro Controller, or maybe it's just fewer people have had issues with it. The sad reality is that if we were not so close to the end of the Switch's life cycle, and more people faced drifts on their Pro Controller suddenly and started to reach out to Nintendo because they were facing those drifts, I guarantee you Nintendo would ignore them. You'd have to do the whole song and dance all over again for them to start offering repairs. Because, like I said, this is Nintendo after all. They've set a precedent. I want you to take this moment and ask yourself, do you have faith in the Switch 2 Joy-Con? Right now, based off of everything we experienced in the past 8 years, do you, deep down, have faith in this thing? Because even if I were a Nintendo apologist still, all I would be thinking was, yeah, I'm not gonna get myself any new Joy-Cons until more people test it out. Honestly, even before all the prices were mentioned, I was never going to be buying any extra controllers anyway because I have so many from the Switch 1 and they're backwards compatible. But look, generally speaking, I've had faith in Nintendo's hardware. For the most part, it's been very successful, very durable. But the fact that we went through the entire Nintendo Switch's life cycle and they never fixed the Joy-Cons on a production level and had to wait to basically have a gun to their head until they started fixing it on an individual level leads me to believe that this is going to fail again somehow. I don't know what their supply chain looks like, I don't know what their manufacturing looks like, but I do know that if they actually had a solution for the Joy-Con drift and they were so confident in it, they would have brought that up. That alone would have been a feature. They got so much bad publicity because of the Joy-Con drift. They could have gone up there, they've been like, hey, remember that Joy-Con that sucked last time? Well, here's what we did to fix it. But they didn't even address it, and when somebody asked them about it, all they said was that it was built from the ground up for the Nintendo Switch 2 and it feels more durable than the Nintendo Switch 1. A non-answer. Either in their mind they figure if we were to address it, it would admit that we had fault the first time around and that would make us look bad, or they're not addressing it because they're like, yeah, these are made pretty much the same way and might deal with the same kind of issue and hopefully it doesn't, this is what we tried to fix it, but they don't want to talk about it. Regardless of which reason, I have no confidence in it. I have no reason to believe it's going to work fine. It's actually similar to how they announced the pricing. Throughout the entire Direct, I was waiting for a number to pop up. Price of a console, price of a controller, price of a game, price of an upgrade pack, price of a dumb tech demo, but they didn't mention a single number in the Direct. Nintendo, historically, tells you what their prices are because their prices are what gets you to buy their stuff. As soon as the Direct ended, and I realized they didn't mention any prices, that's when I knew it was going to be a crapshoot. If a Nintendo executive tipped a waiter a 35% tip, that would have been mentioned in the Direct, because that makes Nintendo look good. Anything that makes them look good, they will mention. The smallest thing they will mention. The only transparency I've ever seen from Nintendo throughout the Nintendo Switch era was when they apologized to us when they were restarting Metroid Prime 4. And it was only because after that long of a time, if they didn't tell us what was going on, there would have been riots. But when it comes to the Nintendo Switch 2, prices, they're mute. Joysticks, they're mute. Actually, come to think of it, we still don't even know if they plan on upping the price for the NSO when they add GameCube. They mentioned they're adding GameCube, they mentioned they're going to be adding GameCube games which will certainly be drip-fed. They mentioned that Game Chat would be part of Nintendo Switch Online. They brought up all of it, but they did not mention that it was going to stay the same price, and that worries me. Because again, if Nintendo was going to keep the same price, they would have let off with that. In any case, look, as with Nintendo hardware in general, I'm pretty sure if you were to buy a Nintendo Switch 2, you won't have that many issues. Technically speaking, the Nintendo Switch 1 didn't really have that many issues. It was one large issue. Although I did have some issues with the rail, and one of my Joy-Cons for some reason will not be read as an individual Joy-Con and has to be paired with the other one, but that might be a me thing, I'm not sure. Either way, as a fellow Nintendude, I'm just giving you a warning, friend to friend. If you do indeed plan on buying the Nintendo Switch 2 on launch, keep an eye on that Joy-Con. Store it in high places, make sure it is always in a dust-proof location. Actually, you know what? Keep it in the box, don't even use it. Because if it does eventually start to drift, you're going to be waiting quite a few years until Nintendo agrees to fix it. And if you're going to fix it yourself, well, it's going to take a while until the parts end up on AliExpress and then eventually make it to Amazon. I mean, you're looking at a good 2 or 3 years max. Alternatively, you could also just wait a few months and buy the console outside of the launch window. It's up to you, but be smart about your purchases, and best of luck. Thanks again for joining me. I will catch you on the next one.